Suffolk Matters, where all of Suffolk County meets the men and women of Suffolk AME. News, opinions, and insights you won't hear anywhere else. Here's your host, the president of New York's largest independent union, Suffolk AME's Dan Leveler.
Welcome to another edition of Suffolk Matters on Walk 97.5 and 94.3 The Shark, where Suffolk County meets the men and women of Suffolk AME. News and views you can't hear anywhere else.
So my guest this morning is Legislator Jason Richburg, who's also the Budget Committee Chair and represents the 15th Legislative District here in Suffolk County. Good morning, Jason.
Good morning, and thank you for having me. Thank you for this opportunity.
Yeah, we're happy to have you. I mean, there's so many things that we can talk about, and we will. But most importantly, let's just talk a little bit about your background. I think it's good context into the rest of the conversations we're going to have here today. So just let us know a little bit about how you got involved in government, what you've done up until being elected into this spot.
So I guess you could say I was born in government, right? So that Bane line from The Dark Knight, right? So my grandparents, my grandfather worked for the State Division of Human Rights. My father worked for the federal government in the Inspector General's office, and he worked right across from the World Trade Center. My mother worked for the Transit Authority. So government and politics and policy has always been in my family. I went to school, and I ended up going to school in Ohio, and I came back, and I saw some things out there that I didn't like, and I didn't want them to happen here. And so I wanted to get involved, and I reached out to almost every elected official I could to see if they were hiring. I ended up interviewing for a position with Dwayne Gregory, who was then a legislator in this seat. I got hired, and then from there, it's been an amazing ride, and it's been I've had the pleasure of representing the people of Suffolk County in a number of different seats, but also in a number of different positions just to get things done, which is the most important thing.
Sure, and when Legislator Gregory, or should I say
Councilman
currently Councilman. When he brought you in, and you worked your way up, he was working his way up also. He eventually became presiding officer, and you were integral in all the things that he was doing. So you really got that front row seat of. It's not even. I don't even think it's right to say front row seat. Like you were working the front line with him. So
and I got to go in some great positions, being the chief deputy clerk and clerk of the legislature. I got to get some real governmental experience of what the day-to-day life is like. When you're in a district office, it's advocacy for your community. It's working on policy things to really move things forward for the community. But working in the clerk's office, because I'm working hand in hand, literally with folks from AME and from all the bargaining units at the same time, and trying to get people the information that they need. And so it was a great experience because I got to see every day the great work that everyone in this county does. And I know sometimes, it's not celebrated enough and we don't talk about it enough, but the person who is in Department of Labor on whatever level is doing as much great work as the person who comes in at the end of the night. And I got to, and the great thing is I got to talk to all these people coming in and get their perspective, because sometimes people are wary of talking to you, but I could see how their kids are doing and what they're doing on the weekend and their significant others. It was a great experience and one that I treasure. So I still see some of the folks now, and we have conversations like we never left.
Yeah, that's awesome. So let's just jump into I guess the worst thing we're going to have to talk about today, and that is change, right? And not that necessarily change is bad. Change brings opportunity. But it also brings uncertainty. And the election cycle this year was maybe a little surprising. So I wanted to just get your take on some of the things you've observed in this past election cycle.
So I think change is the only constant in life. Nothing stays the same. It doesn't matter if it's 15 years or 5 years or 2 years, right? We all grow. We all get older. And our perspectives change. And I think what's important to understand is that there's no contest. The people of Suffolk County made their decision of who they want to lead, come January 1st in various positions. We don't necessarily have to like it, but we all have to agree with it, right? I think that's a lesson for all of us. But I think what has changed for me is the fact that, I just have to work with different people. At the end of the day, we all have a responsibility to work together to get things done. It doesn't matter what seat you are and what animal you rode in on, whether it was a donkey or an elephant or a unicorn. It doesn't matter. The main thing is that we have to work. And it's not about, us retreating to our sides. It's figuring out where we can find common ground, because we still have a county executive, as a Democratic county executive. There's 11 seats in the legislature that have gone to the Republicans, and there's 7 seats that are in the Democratic hands. We all have to work together. No one person has control. So we have to work together, because the people of Suffolk County want us to do this.
Sure. And that's, I think everybody expects that from their elected leaders. And one thing that I've been saying a lot recently, it's just my take or my observation. In any race, generally speaking, there are some folks that vote for one side of the aisle and some folks that vote for the other. And when you have that seat change from one side to the other, the job remains the same, right? And I think that's what you're getting to. Like, you still have to represent the people in your district, and you still have to represent the interests of Suffolk County government, and getting things done is going to require working across the aisle. To be successful, it can't be any one particular party calling all the shots all the time.
Because if we do it that way, then it's not going to work out.
Right.
And the other thing is that I'm committed, and I've made this commitment to you and to everyone, that I'm here to work.
Yep.
I'm not here to fight with you. I'm not here to, I'm here to work. I'm here to get things done. So, and as long as folks are ready to work, I'm here to stand right with you.
Awesome. Is there anything that kind of stands out to you in terms of, what they were calling the red wave? Is there anything that you can kind of point to?
I think a lot of times when I was out, day of, weeks before, a lot of folks were voting on issues that weren't really, I can just soak them on the county level, did not affect the county or the town, right? Some folks were upset about their school district budget. Some folks were focusing on what was going on in national politics. And some people were, just angry. And, some people don't like the direction that things are going in, and so they acted on that. And I think the good thing and the bad thing is that when you talk about local government, we sort of get the good and the bad all the time, right? So if you're mad at the president or your congressman or the U.S. Senate, you're going to take it out on, the school bus company, right? You're going to take it out on the, your county legislator. You're going to take it out on whoever. And it's understandable. And a lot of times government does a horrible job explaining what we all do. If we have we could have a 2-hour, maybe 3-day conversation about sewage treatment plants, right? And I know all of it. We've taken tours, right? But the average person does not understand it. And so, because we don't tell them why local government is important. And in schools, we don't really teach about who your county executive is or who your county legislator is. And that's the other part. So we have to do a better job of informing the public of what we do on a daily basis.
Yeah, basic civics. And, I also find that folks tend to look at government like any utility, right? You bring up sewage treatment. You don't think about the sewer, how its process works, how does it get from my house to wherever it's going. Nobody really spends a lot of time wondering about that until they got a blockage. And then they want it fixed. You know what I mean? So in a way, I think folks look at government as a utility. It's just there. It's supposed to work. And you know what? The first time I get a pothole on a town road, I don't care that it's the town's responsibility. I'm calling anyone and everyone. I might call a congressman. I say me, but I mean folks in general. They'll just call around. So I'm sure as part of your day-to-day job, you're going to get folks reaching out to you and asking you to solve problems that have nothing to do with county or.
Right, and we get that all the time. And my job is to get you the answer. Whether you like the answer or not, I can't help you with that. But my job is to get you the answer. Right. We spend a lot of time emailing other levels of government, making phone calls to get things done for folks. And that's our responsibility. I look at each legislator as the chief advocate for their district, right? And so my job is to advocate for you on whatever the issue is and get you the answer that you need.
Yeah, no, I agree. And, just one last thing about the election cycle. So 21 was what it was, but now 22, we're going to be looking at midterm elections. It's a big thing. That's gonna have an effect on local and specifically statewide races. Something that we pay close attention to as part of our universe. Really matters to the folks in Suffolk County that are operating at your level. Really matters to labor people, and especially those of us that are tasked with getting things done on the state level on behalf of our members. And that would be the year you'd expect to see a wave of some sort, whether people are really thrilled or really not thrilled with what's happening on the national level. That's where you'd expect a bigger turnout and you'd expect a stronger voice. Is there anything you're seeing come for 22 that really stands out? Do you think this is going to be a continuation of the red wave? Do you think this year will create some sort of backlash next year?
I think if anything, the last 5 or 6 years has told us that we can't really plan out that far. I think regardless of what, I can pontificate and sit here like I'm on CNN or Fox News and tell you what, but I mean, the be all and end all is, everybody needs to get their message out, the right message, whatever, and don't talk about what, the other person is doing or not doing. What are you doing? What is your perspective? And I think that's what people want to hear. People want to hear what you've done, what you want to do, what your goals are for the future. Because we're in a really, really important time in our lives. And I know people say that every election year, but we're at a point in time where we see, once in a lifetime storms happen every 3 weeks, right? Yeah. We have shortages of materials because it's sort of a layoff of what happened in the pandemic, because people weren't working for a period of time. So you didn't have people cutting down trees. So you didn't have paper being made. So you don't have the wood. And so now we're at a point in time where we have to make critical decisions about how we maintain our own internal infrastructure, our own internal businesses, and how do we make sure that our future generations are educated and empowered as we move forward? Because in the pandemic, it was hard to get masks because there was nothing made in the United States, right? So how do we change that? And that's really what's at the linchpin of 2022. Beyond all the other, vaccine and all other stuff, to me, the bread and butter issue is how are we moving forward? What is your vision for the future?
Sure. And, to that point, I think sometimes folks vote based on what's in their pocket, what's happening in their neighborhood, right? And those very, micro decisions on a macro level can be very confusing and difficult to predict. But, if you expect a strong economic downturn, you can expect very low opinion on how a particular public figure is doing, whether or not they're related to that issue, right? So
right.
It is a bit of a
and we all
game.
and the thing is we all live in different universes, right? There's a suburban universe, there's a North Shore universe, there's a South Shore universe, and sometimes those universes collide. But all those, somebody on the South Shore, they want to make sure that their boat doesn't end up in the middle of their house, because it's happened, So, and it doesn't mean that those folks are wealthy. It just means that they live on the water and they have a boat. It could be a $5,000 dinghy, but whatever, they don't want it sitting in their living room.
So, all right, let's get into the 2022 operating budget. The county had proposed various things. The working group came together, did a bunch of work on that, and was able to, make the necessary changes and put things forward. But, what are some things we can talk about that this 2022 operating budget brings to Suffolk County that, for most folks didn't seem like it was going to be a reality? I mean, I think we really thought 22 was going to be a very difficult budget year. And for the first time since I've been in this position, there's a budget in front of us that actually does things.
I think I remember having a conversation with you in 20, and it was like, what are we going to do? Like, where are we going to go? What the heck is happening? I mean, we had one conversation a week, and then a week later, we were thinking doom and gloom, end of the world type stuff. and to come back and know that we're going to have $127 million surplus. But before I go to that, the bipartisan working group came together and worked together, right? That was the first win. Is the bipartisan working group came together and worked together and put together a budget that fit a number of priorities for everyone. We put $320 million into reserves. It's the most amount of reserves that we've had. We're able to pay off some debts. We're 228 projects over the next 2 years will be paid for in cash. It's going to avoid $3.5 million in debt service costs. I mean, that alone is a win. And I'm pretty sure if when we were in the 21 budget cycle, if you and I had that conversation, you were like, "Oh, well, that's a victory, right?" Yeah. And then, but it's like one of those. But wait, there's more. It's like an infomercial. We also have we're expanding early voting sites, so we're going from 12 early voting sites to 26. That's a win. We're buying a new helicopter. I mean, I could keep going on. We're doing technological advances. We're adding hundreds of positions or filling hundreds of positions that we weren't able to fill over the last 10 years. So I think it's a lot of wins that in individual budget cycles we would have been happy for. And the fact we got them all in one cycle and still have a surplus is amazing.
Right. Yeah. And just two things on that. So first and foremost, we use the term debt service. And I guess for the average person out in the world, that's like interest on your credit card, right? That's money you're paying someone else because you didn't have money today and now you owe them. And when government borrows, government gets charged interest.
Right.
So basically what we're talking about in that effect is, we know we need to build X for Suffolk County. Suffolk County needs a particular thing, and it needs to be built. And we have to go to someone and borrow the money to get it built, and then we end up paying more than we should have. And when I say we, I mean we, the taxpayers, are paying more than we should have because we had to borrow for it. So to be able to talk about hundreds of projects funded in cash means hundreds of projects not borrowed against, not paying that. So just trying to get that definition of debt service out.
It's like going out and putting windows on your house.
Yes.
And then when you put the windows on your house, you put it in your credit card, and then all of a sudden somebody gave you the $15,000, so you don't have to do that.
Right. So, there's that. Additionally, when we talk about, I guess the most, what's the best way to put it? We know we'd gotten federal relief. But the reason we had gotten federal relief is because all the conversation, that didn't happen magically. No. And some folks get the impression, oh, well, the federal government bailed you out. Well, the federal government bailed us out because everybody on every level was talking to the federal government saying, we need help. And that's your role, so please help. And that's why this whole thing kind of came together that way. It wasn't, we accidentally won the federal lottery. It was a necessary component of what we're doing.
And it was folks like you and other labor leaders and governmental leaders saying, for the last 15 years, these are the things that are important. These are the things that we need. We're not getting the amount of money. And the other thing that's important to that is the federal government and the state government have been giving us more and more responsibilities and not giving us the money for it. So what happens is when you have more responsibilities and less money to cover for it, sooner or later, something is going to have to be fixed. And so now we got all this money from the federal government that we're able to have, one of the largest sewer expansion projects in county history. We're able to really do real road work in some of our communities. We're able to do more sustainable projects moving forward. We're able to rebuild some of our buildings, a number of other things. But it's taken 15, 20 years in some aspects to get to this point.
Yeah, no, I agree. And just to remind everyone, I'm speaking with legislator Jason Richburg. He works out of the 15th Legislative District and is also the chair of the Budget Committee. And talking about the Budget Committee some more, what were some priorities that you really found, I guess globally for the legislature, yourself and the folks on the working group? What were some of the priorities that you saw realized in this budget and that were ultimately voted through?
So we're able to give more, first of all, the positions for county workers. I know we've been needing county positions for almost a decade, if not more. So I think that was the number one thing, that we were able to invest in our county workforce. because if we don't invest in our county workforce, those are the folks who are carrying out the missions that we're giving. So I think that's key. But we're also able to use some of the money that we're gotten from different lawsuits and different other sources and put them into people's hands to do the work. The opioid money is perfect. Getting money into our youth agencies so we can have some aversion programs, so we can give folks some training. Working with different departments in the county to better our infrastructure on so many different levels. And when you talk about infrastructure, we're not talking about the walls and bridges and roads. We're also talking about our electronic infrastructure. Because folks, you go to the county for services, and we need to make sure our data is protected. We need to make sure that everything that you give us, whether it's your forms or whatever, all the information is protected, because people don't understand we get attacks from outside entities. So I think those were great. But again, the $320 million that we're able to put in reserves is even better, because that gives us, in case something happens that's unexpected, we have enough money that we can help ourselves out, going forward.
For AME, this would be somewhat counterintuitive, but one of our priorities, and I think that you guys not only heard our message, but I think you believe the same thing without us even adding our voice to the conversation. One of the things we wanted to see was that we didn't just take every penny that wasn't nailed down and spend it all this year. Those reserves are very important. Those reserves are very important because, as you were saying, there's going to be surprises, and these things that usually happen once in a lifetime seem to just be happening back to back, right? Superstorm Sandy, that was a big one. But there have been a number of storms since then that were very big and surprising and costly to deal with. We've got this global pandemic. We have, all of the various issues that can happen basically have been happening.
Back to back.
So knowing that at least there's a cushion. The next time something happens, there's going to be a little time to kind of ride that out and figure out how to refund the reserves again to be prepared for the next one. It's always good to have a little bit of cushion in that regard. It's not that the government could provide additional services and chooses not to. It's that the government realizes if they don't have the reserves, we're going to get back into what we were talking about earlier, debt service, because we're going to have to borrow money if we don't have reserves, and then we're going to have to pay that back and more.
And we're limited to what we can use those reserves for. And so think about these reserve funds as your savings account. And so you want to have enough savings so you can make payroll. So we can we can do the kitchen table issues, make sure all of those things are covered, make sure we keep these positions funded as we go forward.
Sure. And, over the years, I feel like in Suffolk County, we have become experts in bad budgets. And not bad budgets like they weren't well thought out and they weren't well planned. Bad budgets is they kind of were limited in what they could do based on what was available. Now having this influx and the ability to make smart choices with that influx of revenue, again, as surprising as it was, and as positive and as exciting as it was, Suffolk County in general, and I mean on the labor side, the workforce side, and I mean folks in your office, even the administration, and putting together the budget, we've never had this problem before.
I think the better way we could frame it is it's a more equitable budget, right? Because we're equitably sending resources out to our employees, to our communities, to our infrastructure in ways that we weren't able to do it before because we didn't have the resources to do it. And so now we're able to get a helicopter for the police department, which could help save somebody's life, right? We're able to put money into getting sewers. We're able to hire more employees. We're able to create a better division of labor so we don't have the same 5 people doing 45 jobs.
Right. And that then speaks to the overall morale of the workforce. When, again, government basically being in folks' heads conceptually like a utility. You don't think about it until you need it and it's not working. Well, if you have too few of people trying to do too much work, people burn out. Then maybe, vacations increase to try and, to balance yourself out. Whatever that is, it is a compounding problem. So bringing that staff level back up will result in better government service to the people that you represent, and all the legislators represent across Suffolk County.
And it creates an environment where people feel valued, right? And that's the other part of it. You know, we have positions, and I know we've talked about 911 operators and our emergency service folks, who, you know, they have like a 5-year lifespan, right? It's like an NFL player, right? Yeah, their work life, but not like a 5-year lifespan in terms of like you start working and then, you know, 5 years you're going to end up looking for another job, right? It's the same thing with somebody in the NFL. You have a 3 to 5 year work span. Thank you for correcting me. You're right, work span. Yeah, we don't want to put it a different way. But so we don't want folks to be burnt out. But the only way to get them so they're not burnt out is to hire more positions. Right? And so that's what this budget is able to do.
And that's awesome. And, you know, there's some inequities in the world where you want to make sure that, you know, the county isn't paying less or so much less than what the private sector does, where now it's become an undesirable job.
Exactly.
And you want to make sure government should bring in the best people to do this work. And to do so, you've got to have an attractive package. So you don't want to look at what's the least I could possibly, you know, I would say, you know, if you let's pretend it's not government and it's a corporation and you're looking for a senior person to run a department, you're going to look for the very best, most qualified person, and you're going to do what you have to get them into that seat.
So in the 50s and 60s and the beginning part of the 70s, our Rhodes Scholars were going into government service. From the mid-70s on, those folks left going in government service and then ended up going into finance and banking and the like. So the difference between the 50s, 60s, and early 70s is that's where you had the space race. That's where you had the foundations of cell phones and technology and the like. And from the 70s on, now you have banking fees, compound fees, and the like. And so, and also those Rhodes Scholars were also going into diplomatic service as well. So it's an interesting correlation between, you know, investing in our infrastructure and getting our best and our brightest.
Yes, yeah, and that's, you know, needs to be a focus on all levels of government, right? You want the utility of government to function the best it possibly can, and you can see how decisions made today have an impact 30 years into the future.
A whole bunch.
So, lastly, you know, I just want to talk about this redistricting process. And for anyone listening that doesn't know, every 10 years or so, based on census data, the various political folks in this universe that are tasked with determining where the boundaries are between different districts, they have to sit down and re-review and determine, you know, okay, it's, you know, because of population shifts, because of, you know, and there are so many reasons. I don't want to misspeak. You know, this is really has been more your wheelhouse than mine.
So this process dates back to the 1790s, way before either one of us are born, right? Slightly. So because it was built into the Constitution that we have to measure, you know, and it was based on congressional lines that you have to accommodate for shifts in population. So there was a census every 10 years, and the idea is when you have any type of district, councilmatic, you know, legislative district that's based on population, that you need to reevaluate how those district lines are so we can better represent the people. That's the crux of it.
Sure. And, you know, I remember 10 years ago, this same process was happening. And I can remember some folks thinking that it was great changes and other folks thinking it was horrible. And everybody, you know, kind of fighting it out. And that's not a bad thing. That's healthy, right? That's part of the process. That's what should be done. And if folks are properly representing the interest of the districts that they're in, there's going to be differences of opinions. But at the end of the day, you know, public hearings happened. I heard from some folks that thought it was great. I heard from some folks that thought it was horrible. I heard from some folks that didn't know what they were talking about. But, you know, that happens as well. And in all fairness, I probably don't know enough about this process to intelligently speak on it. But now that public hearings are closed, we're going on to, you know, there's still a couple of more review phases for this before it gets voted on.
Yeah, so there's a committee meeting, and I believe there's a court case that's still up. But and then there's a general meeting. You know, if it gets out of committee on this week, then it goes to the general meeting. So I think what's important is that we talk about being equitable. And this process, these maps will create 4 majority districts of color. So at this point in time, there are only 2. There's LD 15 and LD 9. So this would make LD 9, 10, 15, and 17. And so you talked about 10 years ago, there was a super increase in communities of color on Long Island, and folks on the East End. There was a mass exodus from certain localities to our west, and so that has helped to create a population boom. And we've seen people all over us. I'm pretty sure around your house, people are buying houses left and right. And so, while at this point in time, there was a super increase in those communities, and so it would give us 33% of the legislature could be represented by a person of color, which is important.
Yeah, no, again, if it's representative of the population, that's what it needs to be, right? In my little universe, I have a couple of the women that we work with, have been both mothers and now grandmothers. That was very important to me because I will not understand the way they do, what it was like to be a mother, what it's like to be a grandmother. I am me. I represent my, so I look for diversity in my group because I want these opinions that wouldn't maybe naturally occur to me. And in that same way, there's going to be values in those communities. Again, it's going to remain diverse, right? Just because someone is part of a particular population on paper, where they say, okay, well, this is your race. Well, that doesn't mean race doesn't mean value.
No,
it just means something about genetics, right?
It's something about genetics, but it also has to do with culture, and it also has to do with it's also perspective, right? And I think what you were talking about before is that the perspective of those folks, you wouldn't have it would not have occurred to you how they view things, right? And by bringing more perspectives to the table, it only makes us better. It doesn't make us worse. And the other thing that this redistricting does, it makes the districts more compact. So this Governor Hochul passed a law that basically said you can't have those salamander districts. Those things that sort of, that little snake that sort of goes around and all of a sudden it grabs. You have to have more compact districts. So, they have to, because what would happen before, and we've seen it in other localities, and we won't necessarily talk about who they are, but they create these things that sort of, represent folks, which is great, but they're sprawling. And this does not create sprawling districts. It makes them more compact, more succinct, and, more on the same level with everyone else.
No, I agree. And listen, I want to thank you coming in this morning, having these conversations with us. I also want to thank you for all you've been doing. Really tough time to be in office with everything going on. You've kept communication with us good. On behalf of my members, I want to thank you. And again, we're speaking to Legislator Richburg, 15th Legislative District, Chair of the Budget Committee. Thank you again.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, appreciate it. And to our listeners, we'll speak to you next week.